So who was the 16th president? Abraham Lincoln, that's correct. What was he really like? I want to inform you of some of the different things that you might not know about that aren't told in the history books. I'm a huge history fan, and I've studied and learned as much as I possibly can about this president. From this speech, I hope that you will learn some interesting facts and that you will learn to love Abraham Lincoln as much as I do. Now, Lincoln was born in Kentucky. His parents moved him to Illinois, basically because they disagreed with slavery. His mother was highly intelligent, and his father was a great storyteller. He has no formal education because public schools had not been created yet. So he teaches himself to be a lawyer and gets himself onto the legislative branch by the age of 25. This is very unusual as he had no money, no political standing, and he wasn't popular. During his years at the state legislature, we find out what his stance is on slavery. He's quoted as saying, "If slavery is not wrong, then nothing is wrong. The institute of slavery is founded on both injustice and bad policy." Although Lincoln is a gifted politician and a great storyteller, his road to presidency was not an easy one. It was marred with bouts of mental illness, political defeats, and personal sufferings. In the year 1940, he has lost his seat as a state legislator, and he has suffered several personal tragedies. He becomes depressed and suicidal, losing a tremendous amount of weight, to the point where his friends sit beside him, worried that he is not going to make it. The only thing that keeps him from death is the thought that there is no afterlife, and the only way to be immortalized or continue upon death is in the memories of people. This becomes his life goals. He wants nothing less than to earn the respect and admiration of his fellow man. Although he pulls himself out of the depressions and things begin to turn around for Lincoln, personally and politically, it remains an uphill battle. He's elected to Congress, and he returns home to a successful law practice when tragedy strikes. His 3-year-old son dies of pulmonary tuberculosis. Now, this makes his wife extremely crazy. She is just devastated by the loss, and she becomes so erratic that she becomes mentally and verbally abusive towards Abraham and their 2 sons. He then goes on the road. This launches his political career. He becomes a senator and then, of course, the sitting president, where he's attacked by the popular newspapers, saying that they can't believe that this country bumpkin has made it all the way to the presidency and that as a country, we're doomed. Lincoln then chooses an unusual path, different than the former presidents. His cabinet he makes up of his enemies and his political opponents. When asked about this by the Chicago Tribune, his response is, "We needed the strongest men of the party in the cabinet. We need to hold our own people together. I looked the party over and concluded that these were the strongest men, that I had no right to deprive the country of those services." Another unusual thing that Lincoln does is he opens the White House to the public. So the general public is allowed to enter and just hang out. I want to show you a picture. Now, this here is a picture of the Union soldiers just hanging out in the White House. And this one is a picture of just the general public having like a party at his house. So in the middle of all this, the Civil War is going on. And there's thousands and thousands of Union soldiers lined up along the Potomac River. Now, they use this as a bathroom, and this causes an outbreak in typhoid fever, which Lincoln's own son dies in the White House because of this. The war it's not popular. Lincoln suffers tremendously. He suffers personally the loss of his son. He also suffers with every death that is caused by this war. He pours this into his writing. He writes the Gettysburg Address, and after he writes it, he turns to his friend who sits next to him and he says, "Layman, that speech won't scour. It was a flat failure and people are disappointed." Now, I find this very ironic that one of the greatest addresses in history, Lincoln himself thinks is a failure, and that's just typical of Lincoln. He never knows what a great man he is and how well he is liked. After the war ends, Lincoln has a dream that the sitting president dies. He sees armed guards around the dead president, and he also sees mourners. Now, he doesn't realize that this is himself, but it is the premonition of his own death. Lincoln goes to the theater that night, and he's shot, but he doesn't die immediately. He succumbs to his wound only after 9 hours of being in a coma. He dies at 7:22 a.m. on April 15th, and both the North and the South suffer tremendously upon the death of this great president. The North, because we just won the war, he was their hero, and the South, knowing that he was an honest, good, forthright man that would have turned things around for them, as the South had been essentially burned to the ground. So, in answering my initial questions, who was the 16th president and what was he truly like? I say that Lincoln was more than just what the history books tell us. He was a humanitarian with a huge heart for all people, finding the good even in his enemies. His ambition to respect his fellow man was a life success. It came to fruition, allowing him, just as he envisioned, to remain in the hearts and minds of men. Lincoln was never the self-assured, confident man that the history books make him appear to be. He did aim high and strived for the better good, but he was never quite sure whether he actually attained it. He was a regular Joe with high morals and a unique ability to read other men's souls. I hope that I've given you some new and interesting facts about Abraham Lincoln, and that you have come to love this man as much as I do. Thank you.